You're listening to Stu's Wrestling Podcast, established 2019. Direct from the North Wales coast, his verbal skills definitely outweigh his wrestling ability. It's time for British Wrestling's sharpshooter, your host, Stu Palmer.
Well, welcome to episode 24. This is a big one this week. I said I would get different people within the industry of wrestling. We've got a journalist this week, and it's TalkSport's Alex McCarthy. Specifically a wrestling journalist, but he's also the US sports editor for TalkSport. What a pleasure. What an absolute pleasure. But before we get to that, I'm just going to ask if everyone's alright. How is everyone in the lockdown? I'm going to do some more stuff on the page this week and the coming weeks. I'm thinking some live stuff where I'll say about what my favourite matches were, and then you can come in with, I'm hoping I'll get some live videos back. That's the plan with that one. Back to it. Episode 24, TalkSport's Alex McCarthy. It's a good one. Enjoy. Hello and a warm welcome to my guest this evening, TalkSport's US sport editor and the host of the only wrestling show on national radio in the UK, Talk Wrestling, Alex McCarthy. Thank you very much for coming on, Alex.
No problem, my friend. I love that intro. I love that list of professions that I now have. Thank you very much.
Right, Alex, I'm going to go right way back here before, obviously, your journalism career. And I want to ask, when did you begin watching wrestling?
Right, I mean, for me, I became a big fan of wrestling around the age of, I want to say 9 or 10. And weirdly enough, it was a thing that I bonded with my gran over. Raw used to be in the UK on a Friday night, so although it was Monday Night War, in England on Sky Sports you'd get it at 10 PM on a Friday night, and then you'd get SmackDown on Sky One on the morning, Saturday morning. So I used to stay at my gran's a lot as a kid, and we used to watch that. My mum and my granddad would be like, "Don't let him watch it," but she would tape it for me anyway. We were both big rock marks. We loved it. I still don't know to this day if she thought it was real or not, to be honest, but there you go. It was something that, and obviously everyone at school was loving it. It was the height of the Attitude Era. It was about 97, 98. It was just a huge time for wrestling in general. Basically, me and my gran, she would tape the pay-per-views for me as well. And I was just such a huge fan of WWE, particularly at that point. I knew of obviously WCW, but I was more a WWE guy. And then when The Rock left, and just as Lesnar left as well, I kind of fell away from it for maybe 3 or 4 years. And then I went to uni, and in your second year, you get a house with friends, and there was a couple in there who liked it too. And I just got back into it. And so from about 2007, 2008 onwards, I stuck with it. So I've pretty much been a lifelong fan, save for 3 years. And to be honest, those 3 years I caught up with on the WWE Network anyway. So there you have it. Nice, man, nice. Right, obviously you've said about The Rock, but who were some of your other favourites at the time? Yeah, I mean, the Rock and Austin, I think for anyone in that era were kind of runaway winners, right? They defined, they're two of the biggest stars wrestling's ever had. And I feel like they had that rare moment where, even at the time when we had them, you could feel it. They were two superstars who absolutely larger than life. But for me, in that time period, I was really drawn to. So back in WrestleMania 2000, I remember Chris Jericho, Chris Benoit, and Kurt Angle had a triple threat for the European and Intercontinental titles. That's like a dream match to me, because those three men overall were just. I loved them. I loved watching them wrestle. All different but similar, intense characters who, could kind of entertaining too, especially when you're looking at Jericho and Angle. So they were three that I really adored. The Undertaker kind of goes without saying, but I also really loved early Kane, like before the mask came off. WWE were just so fortunate to have a rich tapestry of characters at that point. I honestly don't know, although the talent levels today are exceedingly high, I honestly don't know if they'll ever have a vast array of rich characters like they had at that point. Yeah, I agree with you with the current crop. They're fantastic athletically, but yet
on a character basis, I'm with you on that, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing as well. You got to look at like the star power, right? In theory, it should be easier to become a worldwide household name today, given how social media and how interlinked all of, not just media but movies, films and entertainment, how interlinked it all is. Should be easier to be a global star than ever, but they haven't had anyone who's remotely touched Austin and Rock level. They've manufactured stars too, like Cena and Reigns, that people they've pushed to be the man, but they haven't had anyone who's really broken through. You could say a Daniel Bryan or a Becky Lynch are the most organic, and CM Punk for that matter, are the most organic superstars they've had in the last few years. But nobody has touched that status that those guys did at the turn of the millennium. So, it's quite interesting when you think about it.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Which matches are among your favourites?
Whatever.
Yeah. Not necessarily like recent. Going back to when you were younger, watching it.
Yeah. Well, I think WrestleMania 17 is probably the greatest WrestleMania ever, and the Rock Austin main event did that. So I always think of them and their rivalry and their history. To me, as you get older, you kind of look at wrestling a little bit differently and what goes into it, and the storytelling, and maybe pacing or character work, all things like that. But I've also always been a bit of a sucker for just some good old-fashioned car crash violence, and that's why ECW was always a place that I quite enjoyed, but two, the TLC match that was at WrestleMania 17, I just thought that's phenomenal. I can watch it any time. The first few TLC matches they had like that were just out of this world. I don't think they've been able to replicate that since. To be fair, they had a very good showing at WrestleMania for the Triple Threat, but some of those early TLC matches were just absolutely insane. So I love thinking back to those. Early Brock Lesnar as well. In his first 02 to 04 run, he had several great matches. Hell in a Cell with The Undertaker, obviously beating The Rock for the title. He really was a specimen. It makes me laugh when people kind of say, he can only do one or two things, but he chooses to in this day and age. I mean, God, there's just so many. Rock and Triple H, they had a fantastic Iron Man at Judgment Day, where Undertaker debuted as the American Badass. But then obviously they're all ones that I saw on TV, but I've been lucky enough to go to WrestleManias now and SummerSlams and NXT takeovers. I've seen some incredible matches there too. And for my money, NXT takeovers are probably the best shows, the best wrestling shows in the world. I've been very fortunate to see 3 of the 4. I think has there been 4? Or has there been... Yeah, sorry. I've been to 2 of the 3 NXT UK takeovers thus far. And I've been to a few in the States as well, like when Gargano and Ciampa in New Orleans. That was incredible. I could be here all day telling you about great wrestling matches, because in this day and age, there truly is so much great wrestling.
We're very, very lucky, and outside of WWE as well, the amount of content, the amount of stuff we've got at our fingertips now, it's just incredible, man. The depth and the quality.
What I will say on that as well is that I went to Double or Nothing, so I went to AEW's first show in Vegas, and I was lucky enough to be there live for Cody and Dustin. I don't think I've actually ever seen a match that emitted so much emotion around the arena and that emanated from the ring. Man, it was incredible. Although I've kind of let's be real, most media will cover WWE because that is kind of the superstars that get the clicks, right? There's just a worldwide fan base. But that by no means means that we are restricted to WWE. There's plenty of... I love AEW. I think since the turn of this year, they've probably put on the best product week on week. I know the pandemic has, put things in a weird place right now where it's very hard to judge what is what. But at the same time, I felt like there was a period this year where AEW were having their best show ever week after week. So I think it's amazing at this time, in the climate we live in. If you want something in New Japan, NWA has got a real throwback style that I really dig. Ring of Honor with Marty Scurll, having more of the pen these days and trying to tie up those relationships with NWA and New Japan. And then Impact, of course, they treat themselves like an Attitude Era style promotion, and they'll tell you that themselves. Every superstar I've interviewed from there has churned that line out. And then of course, right back round to AEW and WWE. Man, there is so much wrestling these days, and it's great.
It is absolutely. I second that, man. I absolutely do. Who did you feel, maybe going back to like the Attitude Era, didn't get the WWE World Title but should have done? Was there any talents that you think could have took the belt on and been very successful at that time?
Do you know what? There's a few different talents that I looked at back then, and now obviously looking at it with a more educated lens, I still think to myself, man, like what happened? Like, do you know someone who had all the physical tools? And I think a lot of people have said, in terms of being an athlete, he's probably one of the best there's ever been in WWE. Is Billy Gunn. Billy Gunn is someone who has unbelievable athletic gifts. Yeah, he's got all the tools you could wish for. He had the height, he had the size, he had the power, he had the agility. He had charisma. He just wasn't. It didn't translate on the mic as well as it, as people would have liked. And of course, they tried to kind of give him that main event run a little bit in 1999 with the King of the Ring, and then he kind of got in a feud with The Rock that just sucked. So it didn't really work out for him at the right time. But I felt like he had all of the tools to be a top guy. Another guy that I really liked who didn't ever really translate to a world title scene was Test. Another guy, he had the size, the power, great moveset. When he developed that big boot as his finisher, I thought that might be it. Kind of like the light bulb moment. But again, he just meandered around the mid. He got stuck in a horrible storyline with Scott Steiner and Stacy Keibler as well. So it's just one of them. Like sometimes it doesn't work, and then it's all about timing. And I think we could be sitting there and saying the same things about Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, but timing was on their side at that time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All the stars aligned. So I think there's a ton of people. I mean, probably the most obvious one is Owen Hart. I felt like after the Montreal Screwjob, WWE, the storyline wrote itself. How he would, Owen Hart would then avenge Brett and get the title from Shawn. And that could have drew major money because they could have blurred the lines fantastically. But that's not what happened. Instead, Owen went into some sort of feud with Triple H where he came out the wrong side. So there's lots of what ifs, and who am I to say what should have happened? But to me, that would have made obvious money.
It's opinions, Alex, isn't it? We all had our favourites. And then, there was guys, I could list a load of guys I thought could have ran with the belt. It's opinions, which is good.
Yeah.
We all like opinions in the wrestling talk.
And that's the thing, I always thought RVD could have had a lot. I know his original run ended by his own fault, essentially, when he got caught with the drugs in his car.
Yeah.
But he was someone as well, like, a lot of people thought that title reign was long overdue. Like, he was really hot, sort of 2001, 2002.
Yeah.
And then it took him years to if they didn't do the ECW One Night Stand, I'm not convinced they ever would have given him the belt full stop. So again, timing, but I felt like he could have had multiple reigns, but wasn't to be.
It was like, just to go on to RVD a bit there, he said it himself at One Night Stand 2005, didn't he? I'm not being told to say cool and bro and all the rest of it. They just needed to let him loose, but it's the same now, isn't it? They're scripted, so
I mean, that's the thing. Like AEW, I think everyone who goes to work there has said that the culture of creativity is much more, not only just fluid but rewarding, because there's not scripts. It's just a bullet point, which is what it was like in the Attitude Era before it was micromanaged. And look back then, all the magic that transpired. So it's a tough one. And for someone like RVD, there's a lot of characters, okay, that you can liken it to and say, man, like they've got them stuck in this kind of pigeonhole, or they just need to do something else and flip the switch a bit. I don't know, off the top of my head, why isn't Bo Dallas some kind of he's the brother of Bray Wyatt, everyone knows he is, even though they don't acknowledge it on screen. Why don't they just make him some kind of like, that's an easy feud for Bray Wyatt for a month. He could turn him from this happy-go-lucky weird B-team player into like a follower of the Fiend, or I don't know, like it could be some kind of real journey that a lot of the fans would be interested in seeing. Look at Drew McIntyre. He is somebody who was just this. They were calling him the Scottish Terminator. I know Drew really well, actually, and he, we've spoke about this in interviews. He was being called the Scottish psychopath and the Scottish Terminator. And if you actually know Drew, he's one of the nicest kind of, borderline goofy guys you'll ever meet. And I feel like now, since the turn of the year, and they've made him much more like he is in real life on screen. It made this babyface turn, if you want to call it that, so much more organic because the fans just vibed with him easily. So and that's what people will tell you. The best versions of characters are themselves, but dialed up, and that's what Drew McIntyre is right now. So you're totally right in what you say. RVD just needed to be,
be yourself,
let loose a bit more.
And like you say, with AEW, you can tell they haven't got the constraints that you have in WWE. You can just tell, can't you, with the promos?
Yeah.
Jericho's just like he was great anyway at WWE, but obviously it's even better now. I think what he's doing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and obviously Jericho, he breathes rare air in the wrestling business, where he is literally one of the all-time greats, and at this stage in his career as well, where he's seen and done everything. The guy is just on another level. But for him to go to AEW at this stage, and I feel like this rings true for a lot of other talent, it's just given them a new lease of life, a new breath of fresh air, because for so long it was just WWE's way. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And once it's like a fan. If you only really watch WWE, you get acclimatized to what WWE is, and therefore you think that's wrestling, right? So if someone doesn't hold a tag rope, or you watch AEW and you think, God, these tag rules aren't being enforced very well, and it's because you think what WWE is wrestling. But that's not necessarily the case. If you watch like Lucha Underground or anything like that, and I used to love Lucha Underground, the first couple of series of that were fantastic, but you get a grasp that actually there are different iterations of wrestling, and there are different ways to interpret it and to do it. And on the microphone is one of the main outlets in the wrestling business, and it's very important that people are able to project themselves. It's very hard to do that if someone just gives you a piece of paper and says, say this, right? If that had happened, would we have ever really had Stone Cold? Would we have had The Rock? Who knows?
I'm just going to segue now into basically the beginnings of your career in sports journalism. When did your sports journalism career begin?
Well, so it's kind of a funny journey. I'll keep it as concise as possible. I went to university and I graduated from Solent in sports journalism with every intention of kind of getting into football and following that. And then I didn't really ever do any work experience at university, which I really took for granted. I think I really underestimated how important that would be. And so then there was like a 4-year spell where I was just stuck in jobs that really didn't make me happy, sales jobs, cold calling, customer service. I was a floor layer for a little bit. I was just doing all of these different kind of jobs because I needed money to live, because my mum had moved away at that point. I was living with friends, sharing a flat, had to pay rent. I couldn't just wait around for a job in writing. And although I was still writing, I was doing blogs and writing for free websites and things like that. I hadn't really began writing about wrestling yet, other than the occasional blog, which I'm sure if people somehow dug out now, the old Tumblr blog I had, that would be terrible. But it was. I'd kind of, I think it was about 4 years in to that, so I was about maybe 25, 20, I think I was 25. And my mum said about me going back to college and getting what they call as an NCTJ. Now that's basically a qualification to work for a newspaper, like a proper journalism qualification. You learn shorthand, all of that stuff. I did like a 16-week intensive course of that, and in that time I did get experience at places like 442 and local newspaper in Watford, The Observer. And then once I graduated from there, it was easier for me to get work. So I started writing as a betting writer, like a sports betting writer for Coral. There was a company that took me on to just do sports betting for them in general. And I was just happy to be writing, but I knew it wasn't really what I wanted to be doing. So when my missus was pregnant with our first child, I kind of got let go from that job of sports betting. I'd moved down to Southampton, and a few months in, he was like, yeah, we're going to have to let a few of you go, because the business wasn't doing well. So that sucked. But at the same time, I'd been freelancing for Give Me Sport, and they had an opening as an NBA writer. There was like 10 of us who went for this job. I was lucky enough to get it. I needed it with the kid on the way. And then, so I did that. I started with them, did that for like 6 to 8 months. And then that kind of evolved into not just NBA, but US writing, which, luckily for me, covered WWE. I remember on the first day looking at what we wrote there, and the editor said to me, all the essentials, whatever, about what my job was going to be. And I just said to him, if there was you ever needed me to write about WWE, I can do that. I'm a big fan. So if you ever need that, let me do it. And he was like, yeah, I think he's probably thinking, okay, mate, can you just do your job? Come on, mate, just write. Just go write about basketball, mate. So I was like, okay, but I always kind of put it out there that if anything ever came up. And then obviously I gradually started writing a little bit about wrestling with my role expanding across all US sports. And it wasn't long before we was doing good numbers. And I remember 2K came to give me Sport of an opportunity to interview The Big Show and Sheamus. It was part of their, I think it was 2K16, maybe 2K17, I can't remember. But either or. And so Big Show was the first wrestler that I ever interviewed in the flesh. And I just remember thinking, man, I just wish I could just do this and nothing else. Like, I'd love to just sack all the other sports off and just write about wrestling. So I kind of stayed along that path for a while. And then, so I was at Gimme Sport for 3 years all in all. First 2 years I was kind of doing other jobs with wrestling every now and again, right? So, like I was being a football writer and all of those things. And in my last year, just the owner of the company said to me, wrestling has become pretty much through mine and a couple of others hard work, like the third biggest sport they had behind boxing and football, sometimes level with boxing. And he was like, so, we should just make you the head of wrestling, really. And this is on like a night out as well, Christmas do, and he was hammered. And I'm thinking, I hope he remembers this. So yeah, I was like, okay, yeah, I'd love that. And of course, it was months before it actually happened. I remember pestering my line manager and saying, he said that we should do this. And he said, oh, okay, but we'll need to find someone to replace you in your role. So it took a while, but then eventually I got there, and then that is when I started to really thrive. I just focused all my energy into getting interviews, carrying out my interviews, numbers on the website, which were, was doing phenomenally well. And that's when, I built up a lot of contacts. I started going to a lot more shows, WrestleManias, SummerSlams, etc. Basically, I could pile all my resources into trying to be my best at that job. And it was great because there wasn't a job for me to apply for or even a role. There are no wrestling roles, per se, in the UK media, but I made the role. And then after doing that for a year, TalkSport, I'd met a guy when I was on one of my press trips, and he'd gone back and spoke to his bosses, like unbeknownst to me, and they were like, well, we don't really actually cover wrestling at the moment, but we understand you're doing good numbers with Gimme Sport, blah, 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 you're near the top of the very limited niche of the business that I was in. So he was like, well, we'd love you to come and do that for us. Come and be our US editor. And I was like, okay. Like, once again, going and taking a role that didn't exist. But because I'd done good work, it came to be. And then, so now I'm about 14, 15 months, where are we, April? Yeah, 16 months, in fact, into my my role with them. And it's been great. Same thing again. Like, it's taken it another step forward. A lot of interviews, a lot of work. But having that platform with TalkSport has obviously opened up even more doors for me. Being able to get things on air. All of a sudden, the companies want to work with me a lot more. And then the same battles that I've been having all my career. When I first got to TalkSport, people on the radio didn't want to hear about wrestling. And then 6 months in, I was saying to the bosses, look at the numbers we've got on the website. We'd gone from 30,000 in 2017 to like 13 million the next year.
Incredible.
Exactly. And then they were like, oh, wow, there's an audience for this. And that is honestly what was the genesis of the radio show that I have now. So, honestly, sorry for the long-winded answer. I said I'll try and make it concise.
No, man.
This is me making it concise.
It's cool, man. It's cool. Carry on.
A lot of the journey has been, I'm not trying to say I'm a trailblazer or anything like that, because there are real people out there who are. But a lot of the things that have happened for me weren't there. Like it's just grown and manifested that way, and I've been really lucky to have just been there, I guess, at the right time and putting in the work where it mattered. So I'm really grateful for the spot I'm in now, because I don't ever wake up for work and not want to do it. And in those 4 years, God, I felt like that nearly every day. So it's wonderful to actually do what you love for a living, and to have made changes, I guess, to a big place like TalkSport, take wrestling seriously. And I think that does go hand in hand with how UK wrestling has boomed too, which has actually made it's made a place for me and for what I do. So, it's the perfect storm, Stu, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
It's cool, man. Oh, brilliant. I don't want to go off topic too much, but whatever US sports do you cover? Yeah,
so it's been, like I said earlier, right, I was my first ever real full-time, well, not my first full-time writing job, but my first at a major company was a basketball writer. I've always been a Lakers fan. So, yeah, I was devastated when Kobe died, because he was like my hero. He basically got me into basketball as a kid. It was awful. I was in Houston for the Royal Rumble at the time, and the streets were like, when he died, you could literally see it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the breaking news on people's phones, you could literally feel it all around the city. Like, oh man, it just sucked. It sucked so bad. So yeah, basketball is one. UFC is another one. When we was at UFC in London last year, you wouldn't have known it at the time, but I was sitting cage side covering the thing. Like, it was pretty cool. My missus would be like, I see you on TV. I was like, yeah, I know, there I am. So UFC is another one that I've covered quite extensively. Really at TalkSport it covers boxing and UFC, but NBA is another one that I am deep into. It just doesn't do great numbers for TalkSport. So NFL is something I'm less versed in, but of course around Super Bowl you make yourself versed in it, and that's about it. That's about the reach. I would love to hire people. This is my goal anyway. I've pitched this to some of my bosses. I'd love to hire 2 or 3 people to come in and to cover those sports, i.e. NFL and baseball. I think that would be really worthwhile, just to try and grow it out. But yeah, the main things I do is basically combat fight sports, I guess.
Which ones have been the best that you've covered?
You mean covering it live, right?
Obviously, I know you've obviously gone to WrestleMania, so I kind of know what you're going to answer. But
I don't know. You say that some of those WrestleManias are so long, man. Like, I remember by like WrestleMania 33, I'm sitting there and it's Roman Reigns, Undertaker, and no, I like both men very much, but man, it's like an over 7-hour show. It's nearly midnight. I've been drinking. I'm like, man, I'm tired. Like I was literally I was struggling to keep my eyes open. That's how bad that was. So I mean, some of the WrestleManias, like that same WrestleMania, the Hardy Boys came back and it was phenomenal, right? Like, you can't explain those pops to people unless you're there and you feel them. The same as I was there for Edge when he came back at the Rumble this year. Literally incredible. That event is one of my absolute favourites, that Royal Rumble, by the way. But yeah, other than that, I'd say the best shows that I've covered, maybe New Orleans, NXT TakeOver, NXT TakeOver Cardiff, NXT TakeOver Blackpool. Those are all, they were all absolutely phenomenal events. The quality of wrestling from start to finish is just so immersive. It's just, amazing. I also went to the Royal Albert Hall show when Mustache Mountain beat the Undisputed Era for the tag titles. That was also phenomenal stuff. It's just, man, I've been blessed to see a lot of really great shows. I would say for some reason the one that's sticking out in my mind is the New Orleans NXT UK Takeover. And I think that because there was a 6-man ladder match for the North American title to open, had like Ricochet, Adam Cole, all of that lot. That amazing. And then it had Gargano, Ciampa. There was a tag thing where Roddy Strong turned on Pete Dunne and joined the Undisputed Era. It was just an amazing show. Amazing.
Alex, who have you not interviewed that you'd like to interview? That was my next one.
I'll tell you what, I'll let you have a guess.
At the top of my head. What, like a current person now or someone who's left?
Well, just a hero of mine. So the easy answer is The Rock.
Right, okay.
Easy. I would love it. He's obviously a big hero of mine. I still love him to this day. he's someone I would absolutely love to get the chance to sit and talk to. In today's wrestling, I've had pretty much everyone, but there are a few who. I've never had Cena, and he is someone obviously who's kind of half left, so he's hard to get. And I've never had Orton, but he doesn't really do media, so it's very hard to get him too. But I'd love to get him. I would say out of the people that are kind of still full timers that I would love to talk to, I've never had Bray Wyatt and I've never had The Miz. And I think they would both be very, very good to talk to. Other than that, I've been really lucky to have had such a wide scale of people. But in AEW so far, I've had Cody, I've had Dustin Rhodes, I've had the Young Bucks. I've had Moxley, but when he was Dean Ambrose, I've had Jericho before.
What about Adam Page? He's my personal favourite, and he was when he was in Ring of Honor, but they underutilised. Yeah. They underutilised him in Ring of Honor, but it's good to see where he is.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry.
It's one of them, isn't it, where they look at it and they probably think, God, we dropped the ball on that one. I have interviewed him. I interviewed him for about 10 minutes straight after Double or Nothing, funnily enough. So he was a really cool guy, very cool guy in the flesh. But I haven't had Kenny Omega. I haven't had him yet. I'd love to speak to Pac.
Yeah.
Because I did speak to him as Neville, I don't know, 4 years ago. But it was like a round table, so I only got to ask him like a question or two. I'd like to have a real sit down with Pac.
That'd be cool.
So yeah, there's a few, man. There's a few.
That's a good array of people there, to be fair.
Yeah.
Right, this is something new for my show, Alex. I'm going to test it out tonight. I've had people put questions up on the Stu's Wrestling Podcast Facebook page. So there's just a few questions now. Are you alright to answer these?
I am, but you should say people should like the page if they haven't already, surely.
Oh yeah, they have done. They have done. They're coming through slowly but surely.
Yeah, I liked it today, so there you go.
Yeah, yes, you did. I'm very, very appreciative of that as well.
Hit me, mate. What question?
Right, we'll go with this one now. This is Dewey Roberts. Do you think CM Punk will wrestle again? There's your first one.
Yes, I do. And it's him and WWE are literally they're almost playing not a game of chicken, but they just don't want to give up the leverage on one another almost. So CM Punk's kind of going, well, I'm open to being spoken to if the price is right, etc. And then I've been on calls with Triple H and Stephanie McMahon where they're like, well, if everything lined up correctly, we'd work with CM Punk. So basically, it's each side saying to each other, make the first move. Do you know what I mean? But I think eventually, because you've got to remember, CM Punk, I think he's 41 now, or he's about to turn 41. There's only a smallish window of the next few years where you could really get him on a Edge-like schedule facing proper top quality talents. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So one of them will blink first. I just don't know who.
And look at how many people have had bad things with Vince McMahon, and years later they've come back.
Mate, if there's money to be made, Vince doesn't care.
Exactly. So I wouldn't. It's got to happen at some point. Has to happen.
Yeah, I'm firmly of the belief it will.
Now, this is another one from Dewey. It's staying on topic with CM Punk. Now, he's asked, who would you like CM Punk to feud with if he ever came back to WWE?
Oh, man. Do you know what? That's just like Edge, where you just go, look at the array of talent, and the stories you could tell. Man, it'd be endless. I look at CM Punk and someone like a Matt Riddle, and I say, man, that's an easy story to tell. And also the action would be awesome. I'd like to see a CM Punk and Adam Cole. I'd like to see CM Punk and Seth Rollins. I'd like to see, you got to remember and that goes for Reigns as well. When the Shield originally came in and they were meant to be Punk's bodyguards per se, or hitmen, whatever you want to call them. They've grown exponentially since then, so it's a different world, and you can kind of play off that in the story. CM Punk and Walter would be incredible. A Tyler Bate, they're like different generations, but for my money, Tyler Bate's as good a worker as anyone in the business. So, you have so many different styles and stories you could tell with CM Punk, and just given his name value, it'd be just incredible. But maybe someone like CM Punk and the Fiend, there'd be some stories to tell there. It's the possibilities get me so excited when I think about them, and I just, Lord knows if he'll ever come back and do a long program. Knowing WWE, they'd probably pitch him to face Triple H or someone at WrestleMania, and because obviously that writes itself. Do you know what I mean? But man, I feel like with CM Punk, if you could just get him on like a 2-year part-time deal and knock out so many of these incredible matches, man. There are so many on the table, and assuming that Punk can go close to the rate that he did before, it would just be magic.
Right, Mike Angus asks, what was your favourite match stipulation? He's not said a specific time period there, so...
Right. Do you know what? I've got a thing about stipulations where I don't really like them becoming pay-per-views. That's something I think dilutes the quality of not A, the match, and B, they make feuds culminate around the pay-per-view, whereas they should organically lead to these kind of matches. So I don't. That's always bugged me a little bit. I've always loved the concept of Money in the Bank because it's just a multi-man ladder match that's full of great action and the stakes are real. So I've always loved that. Always loved. Obviously, I mentioned earlier about TLC. I mean, when the right components are in that match, that's incredible. But you got to remember, most ladder matches are a TLC match, really, because most people pull out ladders and chairs either way. Tables and just on their own, a table match or a chair match doesn't do that much for me because they spend the whole match kind of dancing around the concept before the final blow. And Hell in a Cell, I think the standards have been set so high for that it makes it very difficult to get a unique what I should say, a Hell in a Cell that satisfies what you crave out of that match. Although I will say Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks did an incredible job last year. But I'd say they're my favourites. When I look at things like Last Man Standing, I can't think of too many amazing Last Man Standing matches right off the top of my head. Like, do you know what I mean? I do like the concept of Iron Man, but again, I haven't seen a great Iron Man in a while. I don't know. There's a really good question, something to think about. But I would say, just in general, like if there's a ladder involved, I think, this is going to be cool. When you look at who's involved in it, I think, we're in for something good here.
The next one is from Mike Mad Dog Angus. This is another one from Mike Mad Dog Angus. He also asks, what was your favourite Owen Hart Reg Park story?
Reg Park. Oh man. Owen Hart, by the way, slightly off topic, is just one of my absolute favourite performers there ever was. And what happened to him is it's literally like the biggest black mark in the history of professional wrestling.
100%.
When you look at Hall of Fame, isn't it tragic that he can't be a part of it?
It's on Martha Hart's say so though, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, it absolutely is.
We've got Dark Side of the Ring as well. That we've got the Owen Hart episodes. Obviously, she's going to be on there. It's going to be interesting, that one.
What was the other part of your question? Did you say Reg Park?
Yeah, your favourite Owen Hart Reg Park story.
Jesus, I don't even know if I have one, mate. I've got to be honest with you. But yeah, when I actually look at... so obviously, for those who aren't aware, I know that Reg Park is like a guy who did... what was he like? Mr. Britain or something random like that, wasn't he? I can't remember. But this Owen Hart, I know he used to do ribs like pretending to be him, didn't he?
Yeah.
But I don't know. All the Owen Hart ribs, man. It'd be very, very hard to recall any of them on the spot like this. I wish I'd looked at the page before I came onto this call now. But there you go.
That's Mike Angus for you. That is, I tell you.
No, fair play. He's got me. He stunned me.
Kevin Williams asks, should WWE and other wrestling companies shut the door on wrestling for the time being with the COVID?
Yes, they should. There's, I see a selfie from Jerry the King Lawler today saying that he was travelling to Orlando and he was on a plane. And,
yeah.
He had a heart attack not long ago, as we'll all know. It's ludicrous to suggest that someone with underlying health conditions who is more susceptible to this virus is actually travelling to do a show at this point. I'm sorry, they've got enough content, enough fantastic documentaries to tie us over for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Just do that. Or they should have taped in bulk like AEW did. These live shows, they should not let ESPN and USA Network handcuff them like this. Not at all.
The way I look at that as well, if they're not allowing Reigns to do anything, if he didn't do Mania, why would you put like a 70-year-old man, in the firing line? He's more susceptible than Reigns.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's the thing. When you look at, obviously Reigns took that decision himself, and for whatever reason, Jerry the King Lawler hasn't. I guess that's all down to each to their own and all of that. But at the same time, the WWE, these people are what they would call contractors, but they have an obligation to these people and their health. And I really, really feel uneasy about these shows continuing in a climate where nothing else is. Nothing. No sport. You can't even, you can't even take your kids to a play centre. The parks are locked. Everything. But for some reason, wrestling is still going. I'm very uneasy with it.
Alex, what about the football in Belarus? Is that still going on?
Is it? I don't know. I heard about this recently.
The Belarusian league was still. Someone said to me on Saturday night. Funnily enough, I've watched Dynamo. I don't know if it was Dynamo Minsk or someone. I think he was putting bets on and all sorts.
I bet they've never had such an influx of money in the Belarusian league.
It's crazy. The fans will just be lapping it up in the stands drinking vodka, one guy said. I was reading.
I'm listening. As you've said that, I've just typed it onto my laptop, and yes, someone played as recently as yesterday.
That's
so
crazy.
What the hell?
Crazy. It's not just Vince.
Yeah, Vince and Belarus, brothers in arms.
David Riley asks, will WWE ever move back to anything like the Attitude Era? And if not, will the current PG product be relaxed in any way?
That's a tough question, and let me tell you this: as someone who had pined for something like, something closer to the Attitude Era for a long time, I live in a world where I hope they would, but at the same time, I think everything moves and evolves, and WWE obviously are doing whatever makes them the most money. AEW has an edgier product on Dynamite, so if you really want something closer to the Attitude Era, you would watch that out of the two. Do I think WWE will ever move back to it? Not until Vince dies, and even then, I don't know. It's one of them things where it was a different time. Do you know what I mean? Like you have to understand, like the things they did in the Attitude Era. There's a lot of it you just couldn't now. And I don't talk about the edgy stuff, but certainly the way women were portrayed would be a backward step. But a lot of people don't realise on the independents that men and women wrestle each other all the time. Obviously we had Orton attack Phoenix the other week. It doesn't need, as long as it's kind of done in the right manner and not degrading, I think you could do that, and WWE could explore that, and there is definitely tones of the Attitude Era that they could utilise that would be more in society, right? I just feel like there is more. They could definitely be edgier, and their storylines could have more flexibility like that. But I'm just not convinced that. To me, I think Vince is kind of shackled a lot by the money, and if anybody doesn't believe that, and that goes with sponsors and whatnot, then just look at what he's doing right now by not cancelling the shows. So you'll get a fairer reflection of that when Triple H or someone assumes the mantle.
Do you think a lot of it's surely got to do with sponsorship? And I heard years and years ago it's the action figure deal with Mattel as well. Why it's PG?
I mean, it's a factor. There's no doubt about it. But a lot of the TV networks as well, they were saying, and this is why they arbitrarily just have no blood rules out of nowhere, and it'll be the TV networks have said no. Same with the chair shots and the concussions. If they want the sponsors, the big money sponsors are basically PG show, for kids. And ultimately, like you said, with sponsorships and as memorabilia and things of that nature goes, kids, their parents buy it for them, but kids are the ones who are going to buy that stuff. So ultimately, I understand why WWE have gone in that direction, because there's multiple layers as to why that's more financially viable for them. But should the product suffer? There's going to be. They wonder why ratings are down sometimes, but when you lose generations of fans because the product isn't good, eventually that will happen.
This is the last of the questions off the page now. This is Dewi Roberts again, and I've got to ask you this one. It's a good one. This if AJ Styles could feud with anyone from NXT, who would you like to see be the person to feud with him?
Adam Cole. That's the easiest answer all day, because they've obviously got the easy. Well, first of all, the matches would be insane. Second of all, they've got the Bullet Club connections, from New Japan. They got the Ring of Honor. They got all of the history that if WWE so chose to lay into would be incredible. But even if WWE didn't do that, the fans know, and you could literally they could do it in their promos by just undertones and just subtle nods, and everyone would be into it. Everyone would dig it. I think that match would sell itself.
It's weird. It's odd to me with NXT now. They don't want to go to the main roster, do they? A lot of the talent.
No. I mean, I sat with all four of them at the Royal Rumble, and the thing you get with I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. The way you get with the people that have kind of helped get NXT to where it is now is that they just love it there, right? And they want to be a part of that. They're making great money. Their travel schedule is a hell of a lot lighter than the main roster. They all get to live in Florida and stay there and record there. It's a great life. So why do you really want to? The only incentive for them, for a lot of them, is to get up to main roster to have a WrestleMania. That's pretty much it, right? Other than that, you can do a lot of what you want to do in NXT now. You can be in the Royal Rumble, be in Survivor Series. You can do all these different cool things. The only thing you can't really do is get on the WrestleMania card. So I think to a lot of them, it's like, why? And I guess there is more money in going up to WWE as well, but it's not. But people are making good money in NXT anyway, so it's a tough one. It's a tough one. I feel like the Undisputed Era, though, with the possibilities and the fact that they've done pretty much everything in NXT, sooner or later they're going to make that move.
It's the 2 hours of television a week as well, isn't it? So you got a lot of time there, haven't you? There's just a lot of TV time for them now, isn't there? It's not 1 hour a week, is it anymore? I don't know. I'd love to see Adam Cole come up. That's what I'm trying to say. I'd love to see the four lads come up together, and then Ciampa and Gargano. But they love it there.
I think Ciampa's already said that he has no intention of coming up. The schedule would destroy his neck, I think. So I don't think he has any intention of doing that. But it would be, on paper, I look at that and I go, man, wouldn't it be great to have DIY on the main roster and have them? I know they've just feuded and whatnot, but you could easily get them back together at some point and have them go against the Usos and every other big tag team. But at the end of the day, I thought that about Revival, and look what happened. So you can't trust anything coming out of NXT. Nothing coming out of NXT is a sure thing in Vince McMahon's hands. And I don't mean that as a slander, because Vince McMahon is a genius who's done many, many wonderful, wonderful things in the wrestling business. But not every NXT talent translates the way the fans would like them to.
Right, Alex, can you plug your social media, please?
I sure can. You can catch me at AlexM_Talksport on Twitter and Instagram. I would say catch me on Twitter, though, because my Instagram sucks. And other than that, you can obviously catch me on Sundays between 9 and 10 on TalkSport 2 on our wrestling show, Talk Wrestling. We have great guests. And, of course, you can call in. I've got my YouTube channel, which you will just find as Alex McCarthy on there. And, that's where you'll catch a lot of my interviews, a lot of the video and audio. And other than that, you can catch me in my work at talksport.com /wrestling. So, plenty of ways for me to be in your life.
Alex, thank you very much for coming on. I've really enjoyed it.
Mate, thank you very much for the invite. Anytime you want to do this again, I'm sure we can find the time.
Big thank you to 3210s for their track Sonar in the intro and the outro of today's show. Cheers, boys, for letting me use it. Big thank you to Mike Angus for the show intro, as always. Superb. Chris Dutton, thank you very much for editing once again. Appreciate it, buddy. and also to Lee, who does my website. Lee puts the stuff up on the website. Without you guys, I'd be screwed. So once again, as always, appreciate everything you do for me and the time you spend doing the things you do for me. It means a lot, guys.